this could be a bit of a touchy subject for a lot of Tiger fans right now. As we know, we've covered the new addition to Clemson's recruiting, the big recruiting official visit weekend that Clemson added just 2 seasons ago. So we've had two iterations of this big recruiting weekend that we do at the end of May, beginning of June timeframe, and it has paid huge dividends for the Tigers so far. Now we are in edition number 3 of the big official visit recruiting weekend, and it's not seeming to work out as well as it has in the previous two this go around, Jordan. And we're going to get into the tough month of June that Clemson has had along the recruiting trail. As good as this class still is, we still have a top 10 class, I believe, right now. It still looks very well, but we are losing out on some big time recruits, some guys that were really high on our board. And, as fans, we can't just ignore that. We can't just be like, oh, well, that person don't matter or whatever. Obviously, they did matter. They were high on Clemson's boards. We wanted those players. And for whatever reason, we didn't land them. So a couple players that committed this past week in the opposite direction. Obviously, Cortez Mills commits to Oklahoma. I don't know if it's a huge surprise there, obviously, that he committed to Oklahoma. Not really a surprise, but kind of frustrating if you're a Clemson Tiger. We thought we had a really good shot with Cortez Mills, and all of a sudden he goes down to OU, has a big official visit weekend down there. They really wowed him. They really, kind of made him a priority down there, and clearly they flipped him. I think Clemson was the clear leader heading into that official visit, and Oklahoma just closed the gap, and Brent Venables steals one away from his old stomping grounds, and Clemson and Dabo Sweeney. Another guy that committed away is offensive lineman Hardy Watts. Now, this was, for me, a bit more of a surprise, and I think for a lot of people, a bit more of a surprise. We really thought that this was coming down to a Clemson-Michigan kind of battle, and we thought that he was leaning Michigan. We did not feel, really great about our chances, but we still had a shot with them. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Wisconsin starts getting some traction, and he commits away to the Wisconsin Badgers. So we lose out on Hardy Watts and Cortez Mills. So, Jordan, just quickly on these guys that committed recently and decided to go elsewhere other than Tiger Town, what are your thoughts? Do Clemson fans need to hit the red panic button? Do they need to start worrying about Clemson's ability to close the deal on some of these big-time recruits? What's going on?
Yeah, well, and to add to that list, I know people don't want to talk about it, but obviously today, four-star linebacker Kamar Archie commits to Rutgers. So, throw him in the pile as well.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat it. Really tough month for Clemson as far as the recruiting results. And as you mentioned, I mean, the official visit weekend, in the past, like the past 2 times, yielded really big time results, and it just feels like you didn't really get that same kind of buzz coming out. And so I really think that part of it is at this point in the cycle last year, you didn't have nearly as many guys in the boat, or at least going into the official visit weekend. I think Clemson did a really good job of landing a lot of their priority targets early, and I think that's certainly part of it, because you're sitting. I mean, as much as we're talking about all the misses, you're still sitting with a top 10 class, and you have one of the fewest commits in the top 10, if not the fewest commits, because especially since LSU has got a commit today. Because I think they were the lowest in the top 10. So yeah, I mean, part of it is you got more of your guys in the boat early, but obviously when you look at the names that you had on campus for that official visit weekend that have since committed elsewhere, you're still waiting on some, which is why I'm not ready to hit the panic button. And Clemson has a really good chance to kind of finish this summer recruiting cycle in a positive way, but. That's it's that's the reality. You just did not land the guys you thought you were going to get and you felt you're really good about. You mentioned Cortez Mills, guy that, came out of the Clemson official visit weekend. He said Clemson was my leader. He goes to that official visit in Norman, and obviously that definitely muddied the waters a bit. He also took a visit to LSU, but I never really thought that was going to amount much of anything. It always felt like a Clemson Oklahoma battle. And Brent Venables wins one. You kind of get that. You kind of get the sense that it's a little bit of a revenge for Clemson yanking Bryant Wesco last cycle from Oklahoma. So Brent kind of gets his revenge a little bit. Although I do think you gotta. It's not a totally even trade because I think you still got the better receiver of the two, but that's just kind of the reality. And then you mentioned Hardy Watts. Yeah, that was one you felt good about, but you were recruiting against two schools that have put offensive linemen in the league at a really high clip. Some fans wanted to blame NIL and what Clemson is and isn't doing on the NIL front, and I do think there's a conversation to be had. But not all of these recruitments came down to dollar signs. I mean, at the end of the day, especially when we're talking about the offensive line, when you don't have a track record to sell, and you're recruiting against programs that have a track record, that's just it's the easiest sell in the world if you're an opposing recruiting staff. It's like, look at the guys that they've put, it's like, look at the guys we've put in the league, and then look at the guys they've put in the league. Like Clemson has had like 6 linemen drafted in like the last 10 years or something. It might not even be that much. And so it really makes it difficult. And that's something that Clemson has been dealing with this cycle as far as negative recruiting. Matt Luke, I think, has done a great job. And, the guys you do have a lot of promise, and it's a good, foundation to the class. But you can't sell a track record that you don't have. And I think that's kind of the reality. So, yeah, Hardy Watts was disappointing, but, that's kind of the reality of you're recruiting against two programs that are just our offensive line, factories, and you lost out on him. Jay mentions Max Buchanan. I don't really consider that one to be a miss so much, just because I think that was one where Clemson certainly had guys higher up on the board, and Max was kind of like in a tough spot because Miami gave him a deadline on when he could commit. And so I think he decided, you know what, I think this is a good time to go ahead and shut it down and hop into the boat. So I don't really see that as a failing on Clemson's part as much. They just didn't push as hard as Miami did. And then Kamar Archie, that one I'm not really. That one was a unique recruitment for a lot of reasons, because he's a guy that has a little bit of different priorities as far as where he was looking for. Obviously, he's the home. Rutgers is the hometown. The home state school. He has a lot of connections, to players and the staff at Rutgers. Greg Schiano has a lot of connections to the high school coaches. There was a lot of things pulling him in Rutgers' direction. I mean, they even beat out Michigan for him too. So it's not like, it was one of those things where Clemson just got flat out, out recruited or outspent. I think that one was just kind of a unique situation. But I do think that's kind of the tough thing to deal with, as far as you missing out on these guys, is you wanted to get more and you wanted to yield more from that official visit weekend, and you didn't. But again, still guys high on the board. I forgot to mention, thank you, Benjamin. I forgot to mention Samari Reed, who committed to Ole Miss. I really think that one was just kind of I think because you didn't land Cortez Mills, it hurts a little bit more. But you still have Dylan Alfred, who's taking all the steps, I think, to eventually end up in this class. And we'll kind of see how Clemson pivots, and if they decide to expand the board a little bit, or if they're just fine with if Dylan Alfred does commit to Clemson, that they're perfectly fine doing that. But yeah, we're just kind of in a situation where Clemson is going to have some expanding of the board to do, particularly at offensive line. But one thing I do think that Clemson has done very well, really just consistently, is when they've had to expand the board, the guys that they do get, typically turn out to be pretty good. I mean, we saw what happened with Tyler Brown after Ray Joseph decommitted. So, I think it's not time to hit the panic button. It's not time to freak out. Clemson has a really good class already in the boat right now, and you still have some big decisions coming up. Bryce Davis is set to announce July 20th. I think Clemson is very much in that one. Jordan Young, obviously, 4-star safety from Monroe. Really like where Clemson sits with him. And, of course, I already mentioned Dylan Alford, who decommitted from Ole Miss last week. I think you are in the driver's seat there. Like, you have a really good chance, like I said, to really finish this summer cycle strong. So not time to hit the panic button yet, and we'll see what Clemson does as they expand the board from an offensive line perspective. You're muted. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it was a tough month of June. Early July decisions haven't gone in Clemson's favor. Okay, there's no way to sugarcoat that. There's no way to be like it doesn't matter. It does matter. Obviously, Clemson, at one point in time, had a top 5 class. Now I think we're sitting. I just looked it up in according to 247. We're sitting at 11. Okay, 13 commits. Sitting at the 11th total overall class right now. You mentioned a couple guys that are still out there, right? Big one in Bryce Davis. We still got a couple highlights out there. Dylan Alfred that we look to try to close the deal with those guys, right? I think offensive line is going to be interesting on whether we expand the board or we kind of just stay pat where we're at. Obviously, we got 3 offensive linemen already committed in this class. This time last year, we had none. I think we were about to get Ronan O'Connell, and he was the sole one for a long time in that class until the very end when we kind of pulled it all together and made it somewhat of a okay class for the offensive lineman goes. Obviously, the only other offensive line offer we have out there is David Sanders Jr. We'll see how that goes. I don't feel great about it. I don't think Clemson's chances are great with him, although who knows? We could be surprised. And if Clemson rolls him in, obviously that would be a huge get. That was Clemson's number 1 guy on the board the entire cycle. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But again, 4 guys all committing recently, all committing away from the Tigers. It's a tough pill to swallow. But wish them all the best. Cortez Mills obviously goes to Oklahoma. Samari Reed goes to Ole Miss. Hardy Watts goes to Michigan, and then Kamar Archie goes to Rutgers. So obviously, linebacker situation, shifting gears to Logan Anderson. Clemson will be all in on him, trying to get to him to commit. I think we have a good shot at landing him. Obviously, the receiver, we talked about 3 different receivers last week. 2 of those have already committed elsewhere. So Dylan Alfred's kind of like that guy. I think Clemson's got a really good relationship with him. He's coming back for the all-in cookout. That's kind of if I had to guess, I think he'll probably, if he commits to Clemson, he'll commit during that weekend, sometime during that weekend, either during the all-in cookout or right after it, whatever the case may be. But I think if he commits to the Tigers, that'll be the weekend that it happens. So still some exciting stuff to come for the Tigers. Bryce Davis, obviously, you mentioned the July 20th. That's a huge kind of head-to-head matchup with Georgia, and we'll see how that goes as well. I think Clemson's chances are okay there. We'll see if we can get a couple of these a run at the end of July to go in Clemson's favor heading into fall camp and ultimately into the season. But that's a quick recruiting update for you guys. I don't think it's time to hit the panic button. I think we're still sitting in a pretty good spot. We still got some good guys, uncommitted guys on the board with offers out there. I
do. I mean, I think we should expect good news this weekend. As far as the 2026 cycle is concerned, the number 1 guy on Clemson's board at quarterback for the 26th cycle, we've talked about him ad nauseum, Tate Reynolds. He's set to make his decision. Think you can read the tea leaves. I feel really good about him being the beginning and the cornerstone of the class. So
I think
it's not all doom and gloom right now in Clemson recruiting. So
that's right.
This weekend.
The beauty of recruiting is it's the long game, right? There's still a long time between now and December for the 2025 class. And you're right, Jordan, we'd be remiss not to mention the upcoming commitment, hopefully that's coming this weekend. Don't want to jinx anything, but look for Tate Reynolds to be the first official commit of the 2026 class, and of course the cornerstone of that class, and really build that class around a quarterback, which is a really good thing to do. So looking forward to that. Hopefully we can get him locked up this weekend and then get that ball rolling on that 2026 class. And, we'll see how that one rolls.